Last month I made a video talking about my personal experiences with video game rumors from back in the day, and while they were pretty mesmerizing back then, I can't say they're anything too interesting compared to what I've accidentally uncovered in the past couple months. Back around the time I was hearing about Sonic and Melee and weird events in Mario Sunshine, some of the most largely known gaming hoaxes and rumors from the early days of the internet had come and gone. Yes, back in the late 1990s and early 2000s, hordes of fake yet very convincing evidence at the time for supposed secrets in various popular games surfaced on numerous websites, and of those many allegations, some of which I may not even be aware of, I wanted to share with you guys some of the most interesting ones that I found, still available from over 10 years ago. I really wanted to take the time to bring these stories into a light because they're incredibly interesting, and it amazes me just how far these fakers would go to convince you of their story, and how it so easily fooled tons of people. As credit to the sources, I'll have the page links to all the rumors I've covered in this video in the description of this video. Okay, while this first case may not be the best or most interesting hoax, it does work as a solid example, and it actually is quite humorous to look at from a 2015 standpoint. Allegedly, back in 2002, someone on the now defunct GeoCities claimed he had unlocked a secret character so well hidden in Melee that he was the only one to do it. By shooting all the credits at the end of any one-player mode, and then completing adventure mode without using a continue, you'll be challenged by Toad, and if you beat him, congrats, you unlock him. These pictures are now infamous, with an equally infamous rumor from back in the early days of Melee. This webpage is completely dedicated, detailing, describing, and convincing players on how to unlock something that doesn't even exist. This guy's introduction even calls out the Sonic and Tails hoax as BS, declaring that this one is the real deal, going as far as calling into favor the Melee manual itself, which only enhances this story. Plus, there were even screenshots provided, convincing screenshots that pretty much walked you through the whole process. I can't find a whole lot of evidence on how long or how well this was believed, but considering how early the internet still was and how upon first glance this seemed totally legit, I bet it was believed for at least a little while, hence it being such a well-known rumor. Skeptics eventually scrutinized the images and, surprise surprise, found sloppy editing of the text and noticed how Toad looks exactly the same in every picture, effectively debunking this guy's story. The rumor's creator also stated that Toad was not included in any other part of the game, another red flag. However, not uncommon with fake character rumors. If I saw this back in the day, I definitely would have believed it given the extensiveness of the webpage, and even remember seeing it passed off as legit on various GameSpot-esque cheat websites when I started to use the internet for game secrets. In my opinion, however, when people who uncover such great secrets act seemingly indifferent towards it or complain about how crappy it is, it speaks larger volumes than anything pictures could convince you of. Perhaps if he was a little more cautious with his details and image editing, he could have confused and convinced gamers for just a little longer. Before we delve into the next hoax, I want to make a kind of obvious point that is one of the most important reasons why these rumors were able to grow so successfully large and believable. People didn't know better. Aside from simply being deceived by plausible screenshots or somewhat believable stories, akin to how the internet was early in those days, so was the knowledge of video games. People didn't know what was in a game or how far the game boundaries were. Nowadays in Smash Bros, if a screen comes up telling you you've unlocked all the characters, it's a no-brainer to believe it. But back then it was a different story, and due to the lack of knowledge, or even in some cases common sense of gamers, the thought that Nintendo was lying to you wasn't a rare thought. So now we move on to the next hoax, taking us to the first generation of Pokemon back to the original Red and Blue games. For this rumor I referenced a secondary source called Rage Candy Bar, which details this Pokemon hoax in massive amounts. Similar to how there was a page completely dedicated to fabricating Toad on GeoCities, numerous allegations and speculation on many Pokemon fan sites from around the time the original games came out declared that there were more Pokemon beyond the documented 150 found in the game. There were many different types of PokeGods, some of which came from existing Pokemon, like evolving a final stage Pokemon once more, similar to Mega Evolutions in Generation 6, or they were completely new and made up altogether. Aside from the specifications of their origins, however, it's the intentional spreading of false information which is truly interesting. There are many small sites and many people who claim knowledge of this subject that intentionally played off of the PokeGod rumor to create totally fake screenshots and spread false stories on how to obtain them, and further tried to create proof that these creatures existed, deliberately spreading around claims that they knew about them and had obtained them. People simply and purposely played off of other people's naivety to give themselves the limelight and popularity that so commonly drives hoaxes to the brink of truth. It's one thing to speculate or, heck, even create fake rumors from unreleased official material, which happened quite frequently as in the case of Gold and Silver's pre-release, but to create a lie from something that so many people were playing at the time, purposely intended to fool them, is another story altogether. For the record, if it sounds like I'm bashing on the people creating the hoaxes, I'm not calling them out on it, but rather commenting on the intrigue behind their actions. Other than the reasons I already named, I can't wrap my head around wanting to deliberately fool people and conjure up a lie out of thin air about such a popular franchise and then going off and passing it as real to someone else. Aside from creating and circulating fake screenshots, as well as a totally complex and unlikely gameplay requirement to obtain the PokeGods, perhaps it's the gamers' trust that went a little too far in this case, and as a result only pushed forward the momentum of the hoax. Of course, with furthering knowledge of what the Pokemon games had in them, and probably with people smartening up when they realized these codes and cheats did not work, the PokeGods were eventually forgotten and, according to Rage Candy Bar, even shrugged off, being categorized as something only the gullible would have believed. Despite this, it's pretty obvious how contagious the spreading of this hoax was, and how important it was to early gaming hoaxes. Now, if you thought the PokeGod hoax was a doozy, this one is even better. I've saved my favorite for last, and it's often considered the most infamous hoax in all of gaming. No, it's not the L is real thing, it's something of a much larger magnitude. It's about obtaining the Triforce in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. It's interesting that with all my knowledge of Nintendo 64 betas and other internet hoaxes, I only accidentally stumbled upon this one a couple months ago. This information comes archived from an email conversation off of a site called Hyrule: The Land of Zelda. So, for a long time, people apparently thought there was a way to obtain the Triforce in Ocarina of Time, considering the beta video from Nintendo showcases its acquisition, and also the idea that the Triforce centered around the Sage Medallions on the item screen was used to hold the pieces of the Triforce once obtained. In 1999, an Ocarina of Time player had contacted this Zelda fan site, claiming they had uncovered the secret to obtaining the Triforce. Believe it or not, there were already numerous text posts about how to obtain the Triforce, most of which were debunked as fake. But what people didn't expect with this story is that it had pictures proving its existence and validity. I know I just covered the PokeGods and called out the purposely hoaxed images, but this is a little more complex first time than simply creating fake sprites. And the thing about the pictures is that there was nothing in them to suggest they were faked. Of course, we know today these are fake, but they were really well done for their time, and people totally bought it. Along with the images, if there's ever a way to perpetuate a hoax, it's to play stupid and seem innocent. When confronted with questions about not even so much as the pictures as to just how to get to the Triforce, little bits and pieces of completely made up gameplay were slowly leaked out, such as dealing with a new temple and obtaining a new song. Of course, nobody could prove or disprove these methods when apparently only this one person was successful in achieving results. They had to be trusted. However, there was a lot of "it's my secret, I don't want to tell anybody" nonsense going on that by today's standards would have ended the hoax right there. In light of this resistance, there was growing suspicion that everything about this was fake. The pictures came into question, as should be expected from players being unsuccessful at trying their hand at getting the Triforce. Completely in denial, a more in-depth, fake walkthrough was created to try and drag this up for even longer, still omitting details because of how this was their method. And with attempts to further drive home the supposed validity, and what would be the last fake screenshots taken, the entrance to the Temple of Light and the Overture of Sages were finally seen. Now, while you would think this allows the hoax to live on longer, it actually mostly ends right here. In the image with Link playing as Ocarina, people notice that the sword holder is on the wrong side of his body, and when confronted with a fatal flaw in something that is supposed to be real, there's really no explanation for backtracking other than admitting it's fake. Despite this, the faker played denial and innocent, claiming they didn't know how it got like that, and saying that now everyone will think they're a liar, essentially trying to evoke pity. But despite all this proof, they never admitted to it being completely fake until months later, in which they essentially called everyone who believed it stupid, and that the flaws were put in the story and pictures on purpose to see who was really paying attention. In the meantime, source images were tracked down, and in an interview from the official Zelda site with an editor from Nintendo, he claimed that no text had been written for the game about obtaining the Triforce. That pretty much sealed the deal and ended the hoax as if nothing else did. Despite this, however, I've heard that there were still people today who believe that the Triforce exists and continue to search for it. In my opinion, by far, I've never read a more interesting or in-depth hoax that involves such an important task at such a popular time in a game's life, so early when no one knew any better. It seems like such a classic case of wanting to believe that something exists, but in spite of all existing evidence opposing its proof, it's simply not true. Thus concludes some popular video game hoaxes from the early days of the internet. While we may never reach the hoaxable level of the early 1990s and late 2000s as we once had, simply because nowadays people are more technically adept and informed in general, that's not to say we won't get the occasional smash announcement rumor or supposed image of a new character being leaked for the game. Being so easily convinced by what I heard from the playground, I can only imagine how many hours of my childhood I would have wasted if I had early access to the internet or was an invested gamer when these things came out. Yet again we bring into question trust and manipulation, except now on a much larger scale, which definitely proves to discredit a whole lot of information online. People get a kick when they can successfully mess with other people and also crave the spotlight if they're willing to fabricate a story simply for the attention and credit of discovery, albeit belittling everyone else with something that isn't even there.